Love. Some would say it took a backseat when the pandemic forced us apart. As a family-run and proudly Canadian-owned company, Charm Diamond Centers saw the need to bring us together with tales of love and created the Canadian Love Map podcast. Since then, we've shared hundreds of real, uplifting stories that prove love conquers all. So thank you for listening. We couldn't do it without you. And remember, love starts here.
We make each other better.
She always reminds me about what actually matters.
You know, love conquers all.
Wherever he is, I want to be there, always.
She just always accepted me for who I was.
He makes me a better person.
It was like love at first sight.
Well, love is the most important thing.
We were, I think, about to start our descent, and he leaned over and he kissed me. As it was happening, I'm like, okay, wait a minute. This would not happen in real life. This certainly wouldn't happen to me. Everything was there, and then it was just suddenly we were kissing, and I just did not want to stop.
Ha. And do you go by Kimberly or Kim? Kimberly and Manuel, I'm so excited to talk to you. Very often, most often, we're talking to people in Canada, and today we're in Mexico with you.
Yes, you are. Bienvenido.
Bienvenidos.
Yes.
Hola.
Hola. Happy to have you here in this country.
Whereabouts are you in Mexico?
Puerto Vallarta is a coastal city in the Pacific Ocean. Mm-hmm. It's like 1,000 kilometers west of Mexico City and like 600 kilometers south of Cabo.
It seems to me that Puerto Vallarta may have been a stop on the Love Boat show back in the 70s.
Yes, it was.
I think that's where a lot of people my age would have learned about it.
Yeah, it became famous as after the Love Boat. I also watched it.
Yes, you did.
Long time ago. It was in the 80s. Yes. And people used to be happy in Vallarta. So why not us, right?
That's right. Okay, we are so excited to hear the story of how you two met and how your relationship evolved. Can you maybe set the scene by telling me what each of you had as a life circumstance before you met? What was going on in your life before the fateful meeting?
Okay, I was working in a hotel development in close to this city. I was kind of isolated because I was not in this city. I was just for that particular case, I decided I was celebrating my birthday for myself, traveling solo. So I planned a trip to Iceland. So I left my working site and I took a plane from Puerto Vallarta to Vancouver, to Iceland via Canada, which would be Vancouver, Montreal, and Reykjavik at the end. We're talking about August 25th, 2018.
Yes.
Yeah?
So, Manuel, you were single at the time?
Yes, I was.
And had you been out of a relationship for quite a while, or?
I had been separated at that time for 3-4 years. Yeah.
So you were single at the time. Were you looking for love?
I think everybody's looking for love all the time. So I don't consider myself to be a lonely person. And of course, I was hoping to find someone. I never expected to find someone as wonderful as Kimberly, but I was hoping to find someone. I was not actively searching for it because, as I said, I was isolated in a remote location, building a hotel. So I think that happened, that meeting, that encounter for a reason.
And Kimberly, set the scene for us for your life.
I was coming out of a very bad relationship. I just needed to get out of Vancouver, and I've always loved Mexico. I used to visit with my family as a child, and I was like, you know what? I want a week of nothing but me time to figure out sort of my next steps. I've been a PR professional for my entire career, and I've always had the flexibility of working wherever. So I was just doing freelance work, so I could take a vacation and then didn't really make any difference to me career-wise. So I just last minute booked a trip to what I thought was Puerto Vallarta, but it was actually, I've learned now that I live here, it was in Nayarit, which is an entirely different province. So joke's on me for moving here. But the last thing in the world I wanted was to meet anybody romantic. Like I spent that week doing water aerobics with a 60-year-old woman and her 80-year-old father who I befriended at the pool the first day. And so emotionally, I was not in a position where I wanted to talk to another male in any romantic capacity. So when I got on the plane, the last thing I thought was I'm going to meet someone, one, that I'm actually going to want to be seated with, two, that I'm going to talk to, and three, all of the other stuff that we'll chat through as this conversation progresses.
Okay, so there you are sitting on the plane and you've had a pretty good week. You've taken good care of yourself, a little self-care. And what happens next?
Well, I was on the plane before he got on, and I was just, sitting, hoping no one was going to be seated next to me because, everybody wants to have the empty seat. And I saw a tall, handsome man coming towards me, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is a movie. Like, this never happens. But he walked right past me, and I was like,
Who was
okay.
Who was that?
Anyway, so we actually weren't originally supposed to be seated together. Just before the plane took off, the flight attendants asked if anyone was flying alone. And I was really sheepish about it because I was. And I put my hand up and I kind of looked around to see who else had their hands up. And lo and behold, the handsome man that had walked on after me put his hand up too. And I was just completely floored because in my mind, I'm like, tall, handsome, must be married, has a beautiful wife, several children. Like, there's just, it was that all ran through my head. So when he got up, we both just sort of hustled over to the emergency exit aisle because Air Canada had accidentally seated children there just because the parents booked online and didn't know. So they needed people that could lift the window. So I got out of the way and I sat in the window seat, even though I was originally not there, just because I wanted to get out of the way and I'm awkward on airplanes. He looked sort of disappointed and I just thought, I was like, I'm so sorry. Did you want the window seat? Because I'd noticed he was seated at the window behind me. And he was like, oh, well, if you wouldn't mind, that would be really nice. Like, it's my first time flying into Vancouver and I've heard it's beautiful. Mm-hmm. So I moved.
And then I moved to the window seat and we immediately started the conversation about everything and anything, no? We talked about our whereabouts and where I was going to. And then it just came out that the first thing we have in common is that I was going to the place where Kimberly's ancestors are from. So I was going to Iceland and their ancestors are from there. So that was one. And if we continued talking, we had 5 hours to talk and we didn't stop talking about that. To the point that there was the third person on that row was a woman who wanted to read. She was just resolved to read her book. And we didn't let her, apparently, because we were very excited about, meeting each other. I just wanted to extend those 5 hours for 50 hours and 500 hours because I was so pleased to meet a woman like Kimberly. I just wanted to know more about her. And I was just so confused because I knew the time was limited. And as soon as we landed in Vancouver, I had to take a different plane. Mm-hmm. Time was short. I had to move quickly and she will tell you about that.
So you start talking about, where you're from. And then was there a gradual shift in terms of the depth of your conversation? And did you get into quite meaty matters?
Like you said, we talked about anything and everything, world affairs, whatever was happening, we went everywhere. And I'm a poli-sci nerd, so I like talking about politics. And I was really curious about politics in Mexico. And then turned out that he'd gone to McGill and I'd also gone to McGill. So we started sharing our love of Montreal. And there were just so many weird instances that shouldn't have happened and shouldn't have been connections, but there they were. We were, I think, about to start our descent. And then he leaned over and he kissed me. And I was just like, oh my goodness, this is happening. And then I immediately thought, because I think this is the Canadian apologist in me, oh, the poor girl next to us, she must be so frustrated and like grossed out by these people that have chatted the entire time. I don't know how you remember it. For me, it was just rapid fire. Like, okay, we have to exchange phone numbers and this is how we're going to make sure that we don't lose touch with each other. And like, this can't be our whole story. There has to be more to it. We need more time. As he said, he had to catch a connecting flight to Montreal. And no, I'm Canadian, so I didn't have to go through customs. And I just I really didn't know what was going to happen.
So I'm curious. Let's go back to the kiss for a second. Sorry, we're not going to breeze right past that kiss.
Okay.
Because I had been planning to ask you. There must have been sparks. There must have been tremendous chemistry between the two of you, which you were feeling. Did you drop the fact that you were single, or did you ask each other that?
I think we had gone through that before, no?
Yeah, we'd sort of talked about, like, I had said that I was leaving. I'd left a really terrible relationship, and that's why I was a lone woman in Mexico by myself. So I was clearly available, although very, in my mind, also clearly saying I'm not interested in anything. But apparently I was sending all sorts of messages, and that's not the one he picked up on, which I'm grateful for.
Yeah. Nancy, if you really want to know what was going on through my head when I kissed her, I would tell you, I don't know. It's just one of those things that you just impulsively, you just go for it. Yes, and I said, time is limited. Maybe that's what I thought. And I said, I just want this, and I'm going to try and let's see what happens. It's just something that you just jump and find out what happens after. I know that there was a big connection. Mm-hmm. Now I know it. Back then I was just enjoying it and knowing that was there. And of course, something had to be done with that before, the exchanging phones and all that. We had to seal that moment with something important.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is that there was something very different than the situation where it's just some creepy guy on the plane next to you who's kissing you. It didn't feel like that at all, right, Kimberly?
No. I was going to say, thank you for interjecting there. I was going to say, in every way I could have consented without saying, please kiss me, handsome stranger. I was like making eyes at him, and I was like, we were finding reasons to be a little closer to each other than we probably needed to be. And but neither of us was pushing away. So I think that just really the sense of urgency was there. I believe the pilot had said we're about to start our descent to Vancouver. So it was a real now or never moment. And so it's like time stands still. I can still be seated on that plane and feel his leaning in and swooping the hair off my forehead and just kissing me. And it was unbelievable. And as it was happening, I'm like, okay, wait a minute. Is this happening? Is this really life? This would not happen in real life. This certainly wouldn't happen to me. Everything was there. And then it was just suddenly we were kissing, and I just did not want to stop.
I mean, at the risk of sounding like I'm getting into a romance novel, how did the kiss feel?
It was very much like a romance novel. Saw stars. I felt sparks. Time stopped. I could feel my heart just thudding through my chest.
And Manuel, was it the best instinctive decision you ever made?
I think so. Yeah, I think we should be guided more by instincts sometimes. You're right. That's one of the best things I've ever done, by instinct. And I wasn't wrong. And I would do it again with her. If the situation happened again, I would do it. Being in the moment is just something you don't think about. And I'm glad love is still like that.
Okay, so there's the magical kiss, and you're landing and taxiing, and you're thinking, okay, how do we stay connected? What happened next?
So I asked her for her number, and she asked for mine. So we shared that number, and I think I remember we said, let's meet after customs. Let's talk about as much as we can, because my plane wasn't leaving for maybe 1 or 2 hours. So we could have had some time. So the thing is that when I was in customs, I don't know how long it took me, but certainly it took me more than Kimberly's row. Mm-hmm. So I was lost, and I just didn't find her. I didn't know where she was. I became a little sad. I just sat on a coffee shop and tried to message her and just wait for the best. And then she showed up. Yes.
Well, this is where it gets really Canadian, though. It wasn't just any coffee shop. He was out front of the Tim Hortons. And I say that, I know, I am not a Tim Hortons person, but I was like, wow, this is just the cliches just keep rolling through. But I was about to just leave because I figured, I guess this is our window. But then there he was, and I just ran up to him, threw my arms around him, and kissed him. So for anyone that's worried about consent,
we were even.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. No, I mean, I think it's very clear that, the sparks were there. And as you say, it's not just any situation. I think it sounds incredibly romantic, but also very much like a movie because you're going in different directions. You live in different countries. Where are you going to go from there? There must have been so many questions swirling along with all those butterflies and stars.
I felt I was filming Casablanca
Yes.
when at that airport.
The logistics were something that I think we were both were very much at the back of our mind, but we just had to sort of put a pause on reality just to let the moment roll itself out as it was going to. And then we would have to do sort of the figure out the next things later. And so we communicated on Facebook chat. And, I kept saying to him, you should be off in Iceland meeting beautiful Icelandic ladies. And he, of course, was like, well, I'm talking to one right now. And, I'm like, oh.
I think in that very short and exciting moment, we made two very important decisions. One is to promise to meet again. Mm-hmm. So I promised I would come to Vancouver once at least. And she did the same. She said, I'm coming back to Mexico once at least and see what happens. And two, the second decision we made, I think we took a selfie because we were about to leave without any evidence of the existence of this princess. So I took the selfie and I said, yes, I need something to believe was not a dream. And I keep the picture on my phone. I look at this picture so many times during Iceland and afterwards because it took us like a few months to meet again. So that was the only evidence, like physical evidence. Yeah.
Okay, so what was the next chapter for the two of you?
I went and visited him in October in Puerto Vallarta, and I just remember everywhere we went, they called us Los Honeymooners because we looked like little honeymooners holding hands and kissing, and I was just enchanted. And I think I was supposed to stay for a week, and then I just decided to stay for another 4 days because I couldn't tear myself away from him. Mm-hmm. And that whole time was magical and wonderful, and it was really hard to leave him. The next chapter was really just making good on that first promise to visit each other. And so I came out and saw his life in Puerto Vallarta, and then for Christmas he came to Vancouver, and I took him around and he met my family and my friends, and it was wonderful. But there was just this part of me, certainly, and I can't speak for him, that just felt like, well, this is great, but yes, Lost Honeymooners seems pretty accurate because the only times we've spent together have been vacations, and that's not a real relationship. Relationships are work and they're hard. And so I had really big red flags in my head of, well, this is so great and I'm so in love with this man, but really, what is our future?
Up to that point, it still seemed like a love boat story, no?
Yes.
Because it seemed like a fantasy that starts and ends as soon as the ship goes, no? Mm-hmm. So we didn't have certainty, or we couldn't figure out yet how or when, but we were certain that the most important factor was there, my interest and my love for her.
We couldn't share the great stories that we do here on the Canadian Love Map podcast without the amazing support of Charm Diamond Centers. They are Canada's largest family-owned jeweler, and they're proud to be putting love on the map. The folks at Charm Diamond Centers are thrilled to be a part of your love story. So visit charmdiamondcenters.com or one of your local stores. Love starts here. What was the reaction of those close to you?
Well, I think Vallarta is full of people who come here to feel happy for honeymoon, for weddings. And I think it's very normal that you come here and walk around, you'll see many people who are living their fantasy. Mm. So it wasn't difficult for us. Again, the difficulty started when we tried to turn that fantasy into a reality.
If what you're asking is how were the people closest to us, what were their responses like to a very unusual, fantastical dream fantasy that couldn't possibly sustain itself in any real world way. Both of my parents are academics, so very much I'm sure they're like, well, what is this? I'm the youngest, I'm the only girl. But they saw that I was happy for the first time in a relationship. They saw their best version of their daughter, and I seemed fulfilled and excited, and he was just so respectful. When they met him, I think any concerns went away because they saw that he was so doting and caring and interested and compassionate and evolved as a male. And they saw us together, and he was respectful and engaged and everything that you would want your loved one to find in a partner. They still had the like, okay, but then what? Which we also did. But they were really receptive to him and excited for me.
Well, that's funny because my question is, and then what?
And then what? Well,
And
there
then
was,
what?
I think that's when reality hit us, because there was an impasse in our relationship. We didn't want to break up. We really wanted to try. And so we kept in touch from the distance. I got a new job and she also got jobs too. And we just talked about our desires. The more and more our questions and our conversations were more about how to make this real. It wasn't easy. We spent like almost a year figuring out what to do and how that would be possible, until I went back to Vancouver again to visit her and have these discussions in a more serious way. And it wasn't easy. It was kind of sad. We couldn't find the best way to do it. I don't know if we tried enough or not, but at the moment, there wasn't any practical way to be together.
It didn't look like there was a path forward together.
No, well, it didn't go beyond, I want to move here. I want to work here. That's what I always wanted to do, to move to Canada and work over there. But I didn't really have the way or the exact plan for that. I didn't have a strategy for that. I just wanted to be with her. So we had to give up. And that was the sad part of the story. We had to break up and maybe wait for a better opportunity. We just broke up. We're talking about 2019.
Yeah.
Now I feel like I could cry.
Yeah, it was. I don't let myself wander down that part of it too often, because it was just completely heartbreaking. But impasse, I think, is the best word to describe it. I didn't see myself moving to Mexico, and I didn't know if I could move him to Canada without us, again, ever having a real chunk of time together where you experience a relationship. So that was devastating, but we never lost touch. And I don't really think we ever stopped telling each other we loved each other. It was just hard and sad, and we just didn't see that there was any possible light at the end of the tunnel for us.
Heavy sigh. However, it gets better.
Yeah.
The listeners might figure that out since you're together in Puerto Vallarta right now.
Yes. Well, at that point, I must say also we terminated all sorts of communication. So I started to feel lost, and I lost any hope at that moment. I had strong feelings, but I didn't have any hope. I think sometimes things happen for a reason. That I'm a believer of those things. And I think it was very important that phase in my revision and my understanding of things, it was important for what was about to happen in the second phase, in the second chapter of our story.
Is there a word in Spanish for that kind of self-discovery journey?
I'm thinking about the translation in Spanish. Búsqueda.
Búsqueda.
Búsqueda. Yes, it's like a search.
Yeah.
No?
Oh, I like it.
Yeah. So many key things happen in my life. My cousin got married with an Indian person. It's also very funny. The important part of this story is that she invited me for the wedding in India. So I went to India, and I said, well, why not? I decided to go to this search and búsqueda. Why not going to India? And I've been always very attracted to that kind of spiritual search. And I tried that, and I said, well, maybe this is what I need to do. And I did. And I went with my cousin, and then I went by myself, travel the mountains, stay in an ashram for some time, climb some mountains, and thought so much about myself and that search.
Everest, some mountains, Everest.
Oh,
Yes, I went to Everest Base Camp.
really? Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Yes, that's humble of you.
Yes.
Some mountains.
Yeah. And I have to say that when I thought that I was the most in contact with myself, this is when I saw Kimberly again. Kimberly was there, even though I thought I was alone. and I was just by myself, and I was the most isolated a person could be, and I was thinking about her again. And I think at that point, when I reached Everest Base Camp, I texted her again, and I sent her a picture. Some people could say that's a way to impress someone. Of course, of course, maybe. But my feelings were also very moved, and they were very intense. I came back eventually to Mexico after a few months, and we had another contact again.
So it's interesting. She was the one you wanted to reach out to and share that moment with and those feelings.
Yes. Yes, nobody else.
Okay, next step. I feel like I'm reading a book and I can't put it down. Next chapter.
Well, what happened then? Next, I came back to Mexico and got in touch for the holidays.
In March of 2020, so before the world stopped,
right.
I just had this feeling of, I need to know. I have to know if this is all in my head. Is there a chance? Like, could we still connect? Have I broken everything too much by the distance that we've had and the issues that we'd had to overcome? And so I just told him, I said, I'm coming. I've booked a flight. I've booked this hotel I'm staying here. You can see me or you can't. And I understand either way. But of course, like in my heart, I was like, oh. When he agreed to see me, I was so excited and so nervous, but really like afraid, because I thought, what if all of this had just been this big buildup in my mind? And what if enough time has passed and really our connection it's happened and it was wonderful, but it's closed. So taking that trip before the world shut down was the most important trip, I think, other than the first one where we met, because it proved to him I was willing to put myself out there after letting us fall away and take that risk and put my heart in his hands and just say to me, like, this is it. And if it's not for you, I understand, but I need you to know that.
Yes, I think she was very brave. And of course, it was a proof that she was willing to try. Mm-hmm. I was very nervous too. I didn't know how to react. It was the ego telling me it would be hard. It would be impossible. It would be difficult. But there was something deep inside of me that told me, love is about trying. Why not go and face it? Face your destiny and find out what can be possible and give life a chance. We didn't make any promises. We just enjoyed ourselves, each other. This is how the world pushed us a little bit, because we didn't make any promises, and we had to make a promise because a virus came into existence in the world. She left Mexico 2 weeks before COVID became a pandemic.
Wow.
My only thought when she went back to Vancouver, it was just of regret. And I said, why did I let her go? Mm-hmm. If couples are getting together and also people are forced to live together, wasn't that the opportunity for me and her to stay? And it was the chance. So I thought she should have stayed. I was just missing her. And I said, what is she doing there when she could be here?
You wanted to be locked down with her.
Yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Basically.
I wanted him to be my bubble. Yes.
My Mexican bubble.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I can't wait to hear how it actually all came together.
So we kept talking, and as it became clear that our feelings in March were new, they were a continuation, but they were also a new development in the next chapter of what could be our lives together. And so as work started going remote, it was becoming more common. I just thought, one of us has a flexible job. So I'm a publicist. I can be anywhere, but he's an architect. So he can't exactly up and go somewhere. And I thought, what if? So I floated it to him. I said, what if we try this and I come to Mexico and we'll see. So this is in like May-ish when I decided I was going to head out to Mexico. So then he agreed to let me come and live with him and try a real relationship together. Committed. This is it. That was sort of our mantra. And it was not as easy. Well, actually, it's about as easy as you'd think it was to get to Mexico in June of 2020. Like my flight was canceled 5 times. It took me 26 hours to get to Mexico from Vancouver. I had like a 19-hour stopover in Dallas where I was just like clutching all of my belongings because I had moved essentially I'd moved my whole life to with my fingers crossed and my heart in my hands. But here we are.
It's been 2 years.
Yeah, it's been 2 years. I came on June 25th, 2020. He was just the softest landing that you could imagine. Like, I've had some friends who have been going through hard times and have said, should I do that? Like, should I just up and go and like move to a foreign country? I'm like, well, maybe. But again, I had the softest landing in the world. I had a man who'd already proven that he loved me, was committed to trying to be with me, could support me if I couldn't find work for some reason or if something happened to me. So I came into love. So that made the transition so much easier and more beautiful, I think, than if someone was just like, oh, I've had it with Canada, I'm going to move to this place. I had the love of my life waiting for me.
I'm sighing again.
I was just lucky.
Yes. It sounds like a fair bit of luck, but also hard work. And
yes.
And when did you decide to take it to the next level?
He proposed to me on August 26th of 2020, and I was completely caught off guard. I mean, we talked about the logistics again, the other L word of me staying in Mexico. And, I believed he was the one. I think we both felt that way, but we were at this beautiful restaurant in Puerto Vallarta called Le Cliff, and pictures will never do it justice, but it's the most beautiful restaurant overlooking the ocean on a cliff, hence Le Cliff. And he asked me something, and I looked over, and he was down on one knee, and he had a ring, and he said, "Kimber, will you marry me?" And I was like, first of all, I'm very rarely surprised, and I was completely caught off guard. So kudos. But I was just, yeah. I mean, I guess I knew in my mind it was probably going to happen, but I also still didn't really believe it could. But it was just this beautiful evening, and there was this man and a ring.
I could keep the element of surprise.
He did. He kept it. I was shocked. So he proposed, and then, of course, I said yes, like without thinking. I'm surprised I was still breathing at that point, and we did all the photos and the things. And then we had to figure out where we were going to get married, because it's not that easy to get married in Mexico if you're not two Mexicans. And COVID, I had to get a letter from the Mexican consulate in Vancouver approving me to marry him. It was this whole rigmarole, and he couldn't come to Canada because
there was no travel.
There was no travel. So we just were like, well, should we just go to Vegas? And so we got married in Las Vegas.
Midpoint.
Oh, that's like a compromise.
yeah. It was
neutral land.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, it was great. I mean, everyone in Vegas was so excited about us because it was a love story that was pretty easy to see and also share. And so we stayed at the Wynn Hotel, and they like put rose petals on our bed and like arranged a bouquet for me, because the one thing I was snobby about was flowers. My wedding dress was from Amazon, and I totally recommend that because it was very non-stressful. But it was just like really weirdly perfect because there was nobody to impress but each other or please or worry about. Like, it was a 2-person wedding at the Little White Wedding Chapel where Michael Jordan had one of his weddings, and I can't remember who else has been married there, but it was cheesy perfection. And everyone was just really excited for us to see love still happening in this time of great uncertainty and heartbreak and hardship. We were just these like grinning idiots, like walking around Las Vegas Boulevard.
There was actually one case in point. There was actually one couple that approached us when we were having our wedding dinner solo. I mean, just
big party for two.
For two. And they came to us, and they seemed to understand what was happening. And they told us their story. And it happens that 20 years ago, they went to very similar situations as we did. One of them was not from the same nationality.
Yeah, the woman was from Netherlands, and the man was American. And
she had to leave the country. So, but they got married, and then married in Vegas. So that's why they go to Vegas very often to celebrate that. So all those things is just wonderful support and motivation for what we were doing.
And I should say our witness at our wedding ceremony, her name was Heaven. So read into that as you will.
Did you pull her off the street?
No, we sprung the extra $50 US to have a witness provided by the by the chapel.
Oh, that's wonderful. Look, I could talk to you two all day, but we don't have all day. So I guess I'm going to jump to what is the future looking like for the two of you now?
We plan to move around the two countries, different, to make it happen in practical terms. I believe that there's some parts of this plan should be just left to hope. As I said earlier, I believe things happen when they need to happen, the way they need to happen. And yes, I would like to be able to immigrate to Canada, like officially and legally, and find a job and spend some time there with my in-laws, which, by the way, I like to be with them. So that's basically the plan. And in between, we would like to go to other places. I think we share that among many other things. Kimberly likes being out, just exploring, wandering, and meeting new places. And I'm also a traveler. So we would like to do that.
That's a beautiful perspective. Kimberly, I noticed that Manuel calls you Kimber, which is really sweet. What do you love most about him?
I love his curiosity, his compassion, his just willingness to try and commit. He challenges me in good ways and bad ways, but he always challenges me. And our little motto is always choose adventure. And with him, I know he will always do whatever he can to make the littlest thing a grand, fun time, even if it's going to the fruiteria. He finds ways to make things fun for me and to play with language and expand my understanding of this new world that I'm a part of. His compassion for animals, children, people, everything, coupled with his curiosity, I think those are the two C's that really keep me connected to him and inspired to love him more every day. Oh, and that's another thing. We just every day we wake up and it's sort of a race to say who can say I love you today and all days.
That's beautiful. Manuel, what do you love most about Kimber?
It's clear to me that I love her for no reason and also for certain reasons. I think she's a warrior. I admire her as a woman, as a professional. Most of all, I admire her strength. She's, as I said, I believe that she's capable of fighting adversity. Her life hasn't been easy, but she has coped with a lot. She has a very, very powerful inner strength. I think that encourages me and that inspires me to keep on.
So she's a beautiful blonde Icelandic Canadian transplanted to Puerto Vallarta warrior.
Yes, you can say that. Yeah.
Thank you so much, both of you, for sharing your story so generously with us. It's inspiring and beautiful.
Well, thank you, Nancy.
Thank you, Nancy. I feel very comfortable talking about it. And I hope this story attracts other people and just get on a plane.
Get on a plane. Well, I'll see you in Canada. Or maybe I'll see you in Puerto Vallarta.
Why not? Yes.
Anytime.
Great. Hablo solamente un poquito de español.
Oh.
Suficiente. Un poquito suficiente.
Thank you both so much.
Gracias, Nancy.
Gracias. Muchas gracias.
Adios.
Thanks for listening to the Canadian Love Map. If you love us, please subscribe and share. And if you want to help us spread the love even more, rate and review our podcast. It makes such a difference. We'll be back next week with another love story to add to the map. This podcast is presented and made possible by Charm Diamond Centers. It's hosted by me, Nancy Regan, and is produced and distributed by Podstarter.